Okay, welcome to Leadership is a Philosophy, Not a Checklist, Chapter 5, The Competency. So, two different things I want you to focus your thinking on about examples that you have seen in your life. My contention is that leadership is a talent that is as rare as all other creative capabilities. So, artists, painters, people that are really good at a specific skill, that's something that they're talented at. Well, leadership is one of those talents, so it's just as rare. And that flies in the face of anybody. We can make anybody a leader because I don't believe you can. And you watching this video know that that's not true. Because think about the percentage of great leaders that you've had that you worked with. It just doesn't exist. But that's okay because I want people to be good at their skill or good at leadership, right? It's not that we can be good at everything. This isn't some pan skill. I don't even know what a word for that is. So, second thing I want you to focus on is the fact that when you have somebody that is hyper competent at a certain skill, that doesn't mean that they're going to be hyper competent at something else. So why would you take somebody and move them out of that ability or out of that position? So, real quick story. Small construction or medium-sized construction company. Guy worked there named Carl. He's the welder. He was the best welder. He was so good that he was obviously the mentor and trainer for everybody in the organization, and other contracting companies would subcontract to get him because he was so good that they wanted certain skills to get done. Well, Carl was at the cap for the way the company was paying him, and one day he went in after a couple of years and said, I'd like to get a little bit more money because I'm really good at my job and I really love it and I just need a little bit more money. Upper management had a discussion, decided, well, we can't give you any more money, but we can promote you to management. Carl says, I don't want to be management. I want to weld. That's all I want to do. I love welding. I just love it. And they argued back and forth, and finally Carl begrudgingly accepted because he kind of, he had life. He wanted a little bit more money. Well, they promoted him to management. 3 catastrophic things happened, actually 4. First off, all the welding that was, all the high skilled welding jobs suddenly became longer and more complicated. And the company started to go over budget and over time because they didn't have people with Carl's skill to do the job. Second, all the companies that were subcontracting, so giving this organization some money, stopped because they couldn't hire Carl anymore. Third, Carl didn't really want to be a manager, so he was a little rough around the edges, a little brusque, a little gruff. So he had people complain because now he was a manager and was kind of rough around the edges. The third one is Carl wasn't really good at running big projects. He was good at welding. He was good at doing his specific tasks. So he had scheduling problems. He had issues with organizing different projects and programs. And so caused a bunch of churn and chaos. So it comes time for Carl's annual review. Management sits down with him and says, look, you're messing up. So we're going to have to put you on a performance plan because you're not doing a good job. Carl's like, I didn't even want this job in the first place. I want to weld. So he quits, goes to another company, takes all the business. And so then this company loses a bunch of revenue and their most skilled person. So there's a couple of questions to ask, right? The Peter Principle. People say, well, the Peter Principle is you will eventually get promoted to your level of incompetence. So yes, but Carl found his competency. Carl loved welding. He was amazing at it. Why would you take him out of that to put him in something that, 1, he didn't want to do, and 2, he really showed no propensity for? So is the Peter Principle the individual's fault or management's fault? It's management's fault. I'm always going to blame leadership, believe me. And then the second question is, what business decision was that to say, here's this person that generates all this revenue for us. We're going to talk about the Price's Law in the slide portion. Here's this person that generates all this money for us and does all this work. Just give him a little more money and he'll be happy. And you still have all these great things happening. But instead they said, no, we have to follow the system. Well, the system's stupid then if you can't take care of somebody that's doing amazing work for you. And then the last question is, Um, what was the indication that Carl was going to be a good leader or a good manager? So why would you put him in a management position? If you're doing it just so you can give somebody more money, that's the wrong reason. If you're doing it just so we can, we're going to grow and develop Carl. Well, Carl didn't want growth and development. He wanted to weld. So let the person weld, because next thing you know, you've got somebody who's your absolute expert and perfectly happy to do it. Give them a bunch of money. They're making you a bunch of money. Anyway, so we're going to go through some slides. And just like I said, I want you to think about the fact that leadership is a talent and it's rare, and that you can't just teach anybody to be a leader. Everybody likes to say it, but have you seen any evidence of this? And I'm going to show you why. There's no evidence of it. I haven't seen it. For 30 years, I've been paying attention to this. Anyway, thank you very much for your time. And next will be the grumpy one slide this time, PowerPoint presentation. Thanks. Alrighty, so now we're going to get into the instructional portion of Leadership's Philosophy, Not a Checklist, the competency. So my going in theory, and then I'm going to give you all the reasons I think the theory is correct, is that the ability to lead is the same sort of creative talent that is possessed by artists or people that are really good at anything. So we could do artistic talent, creative talent, intellectual capability. All of those things are a rare section of society or a section of any given population. And I believe that leadership has the same rarity. And I believe that all of you have seen that same rarity. So we're going to go through some of the examples about it. So there's two things that we're going to talk about and then some creative examples. So the competency. So first thing we have is Price's law. So for those of you that know, and go look this up, like I said, I don't want to get super scientific and crazy because it'll put you to sleep, but go research this on your own. Price's law is that 10% of a group does 50% of the work. So that's kind of crazy. If you've got 10 employees doing a certain thing, one of them is doing 5 of them or doing half of the work. So cool, but that applies to the group and the work. So if you've got leadership or people that are in charge, then 10% of those leaders are doing 50% of the leadership. So we can just go through here and look at this real quick. So number of employees, 90% of the employees, 10%. The 10% down here is doing 50% of the total work. And then that keeps going down. So what you hope is that you don't have anybody here doing 0, because then that's a problem. But that's the going in thing about Price's law. So if you've got 10% of your employees, you've got a group of 10 leaders, well, 10% of them are doing 50% of the leadership. So that's a big deal. But this is also something that leads into the hierarchy from the previous chapter, previous section. That being, hierarchy is chapter 5. So in the hierarchy section, you got to go through here, and this is what a leader has to attenuate. What if you have a bunch of situations? I don't want to throw out a bunch of numbers, but I kind of have to. 10 employees, and they're supposed to produce 10 units. One of them is producing 5. Well, that means that the other 9, there's some of them that are producing 0. So the leader's job then is to go through and find out why and attenuate that hierarchy and attenuate that thing so that your total work, at least the 50% or the 90% that are doing half, are doing something. Because if you got people paying 0, then that's just a drag on the organization. And then people are going to start getting mad. Hey, why am I getting paid the same as the person that's doing nothing or doing less? So this also is an exact example of what was going on with Carl from the story. So Carl is doing half of the welding jobs. And so when management decided to take him and move him out and take him away, well, then suddenly that 50% broke down. So now I'm sure there was one guy that was doing better, But now that pie is broken up, but now it's less work. So you have to keep an eye on that sort of stuff. It's a little conceptual, I apologize. So then we're going to talk about the Pareto distribution. Pareto distribution says that 20% of the group has 80% of the wealth. When you say wealth, that's ability, talent, anything that is considered beneficial for the task to be done. So that does millionaires and billionaires and everything else. Great example for people. So if this can apply to every group that you make. So let's say that this was all the wealth in the world. Well, there's a whole bunch of people. 80% of the wealth is from here down, from 2 to 5. So a bunch of people that don't have a whole lot. Then suddenly you get the millionaires and the billionaires. Fine. Well, let's say that we take that and then apply it just to millionaires and billionaires. Well, then it's the same. You have people with a couple million, and then you've got the billionaires. So let's take the billionaires. You do the same thing, 1 or 2 billion, and suddenly there's billions of dollars. And you take those people and break them down, and pretty soon you've got 1 or 2 that have all of it, and then the people that are down here. So that distribution applies to individuals. We need the people that have this certain amount of talent. Well, there's people that have no talent, and then suddenly 20% of that group has 80% of the talent or the ability or the skill or whatever it is you're looking for. So just think about that. Think about the impact. If you can find this 20% that has 80% of the ability and plug them in over into Price's Law, well, then suddenly your productivity goes through the roof because now you've got people with all that ability and talent. Well, that applies to teams. It applies to, here's the number of teams that we have. We've got teams that are really good and teams that aren't. So let's fix them or find out what the problem is. With your managers, it's the same idea. So here's people that are absolutely not good at management at all. And that's okay because they've got some other talent. Put them in charge of that. Well, if that applies to all of that, Pareto distribution also applies to galaxies, stars, trees, bodies of water, rivers, land masses, islands. Anytime you take a group, there's going to be one that's got 20% of the talent. Well, that means that if you've got a group of people, 20% of those people are going to have leadership ability. So that flies in the face of the quote, "Oh, I can take anybody and teach them to be a leader." Factually true. I can take you to leadership school and put you through a test, and you come out and you can do a written test that passes and says you understand leadership. Now go apply it. So I want to get into artistic examples of this that show why I think that it's the same idea. So a story I like to tell is a real quick story about the difference between being taught something and then being able to apply it creatively. So I was in art class in high school, and we were being taught shading. So I was doing a really simple thing with 3 spheres, and then imagine that the light was over the center sphere, so there's shade here. It took me 50 minutes, and it was bad. Well, it wasn't bad. You could kind of get the idea of what I was trying to do, but it was so rudimentary, it was embarrassing. Sitting next to me was a woman who I haven't received permission to use her name. I tried to reach out to her. And she was basically doing a photorealistic self-portrait in charcoal. And it was shading. So we were both shading, but she was doing the amazing job and I was not. And we had both been taught the same way. So she clearly had a talent. She didn't need to be taught. She might have been able to refine stuff, but that's that. Okay, so let's talk about musicians real quick. Some of the most renowned musicians in the world, hardly any formal training. Thelonious Monk, John Coltrane, Jimi Hendrix, Miles Davis, produced one of the best-selling jazz albums in history, had a bunch of natural talent, went to Juilliard and ended up dropping out because he didn't feel like he was learning anything new. Said something about, if you go research Miles Davis, talks about his technique improved. But none of these people went to school, and they're the most amazing musicians around. Actors. You go and look at some of the people that graduate Juilliard for acting or for music, and there's a significant number of them that are not acting. Some of them are. But my contention is those people had that talent and ability, and it might have gotten refined a little bit at Juilliard, but they didn't learn anything. Not knocking Juilliard. It's an amazing school. Photographers. There's a lot of self-taught photographers out there. My favorite example is a guy named Chase Jarvis, super famous. He was on a web video with a guy, and the challenge was to do some photo shoots with the cheapest camera possible. So it was Chase Jarvis, who's used to using thousands and multi-$1,000 equipment and all these lights, took this little $15 or $20 camera and was taking some amazing pictures. I guarantee that if you gave that to somebody that didn't have the talent, they would take a picture, but it wouldn't be as artistically interesting. Comedians to me are the same, have the same mentality as leaders. You can't send somebody to comedy school. Sure, you can send them, and sure, they're going to graduate and have been able to pass the test saying that they did some stuff that was comedy. But funny or not, or the perception of the world or not, you don't know. All of these people, all of these artistic people, and so same thing with leaders. You send somebody to leadership school and they come out and say, oh, sure, I'm supposed to be genuine and take care of my people, and they pass the written test. You go put them around actual people, and a lot of time they fail. And I've seen it. The reason I believe that is because all of these people see the world completely differently. They just do. All of us going into any of these media would be able to say, okay, sure, I can make red and yellow and green. And then you have a painter that goes in there and says, ooh, I can do this. And whoosh. Next thing you know, you've got a color palette you've never seen. You've got just this amazing representation. If you've never seen the Night Watch in person, it's a fantastic example. The Night Watch is this huge painting. I couldn't do that. Are you kidding me? Writers, they take the same tools that we have. Same words, same pieces of paper, same computer, and are somehow able to write these vivid things that bring striking images to your mind. Other people can't do that. Just talked about photographers. Comedians see the world differently and then just comment on it. And they see it as funny and are able to say, oh, cool. So why isn't it the same way with leaders? I believe it is the same way with leaders, because leaders go in. How many times have you been at work, been miserable, the boss leaves, new boss comes in, and all of a sudden everything immediately gets better. And you don't know why. Well, that leader took the same team that the previous one had the talent to make things better, and did. So suddenly the environment's better. People that are competent are being put in charge instead of people that are buddy with the boss and all this sort of stuff. One final thing about all of these people. I know I'm all over the place, but I'm trying to stay focused. So all of these people recognize talent in the other. So I could look at a bunch of different paintings and be impressed with somebody who's got some reasonable skill, or here's a painting and it's okay. And then here's a Monet. Well, people that are painters immediately go, oh my goodness, that's amazing. Look at the skill and look at this. I say, well, they're both paintings. They look fine, right? Writers, actors, musicians, all these people recognize the talent in each other. Well, it's the same thing with comedians. Comedians know, great example, go watch comedians in cars getting coffee. All those people are completely different, but they're all funny. And they're all funny in a different way, but they all see the world differently. Same thing with leaders. Leaders recognize each other right away. And so that's a talent. And all of these groups fall into the Pareto distribution. Take the entire population, 20% are probably good painters, but starting here and going up, so still not great up to amazing. All these, think about every one of these, it's the same exact thing. So if it applies to all of these examples, why doesn't it apply to leaders? I believe it does, because you've all seen it. I've talked to people and asked them, how many in your life, and some of these people are 50 or 60, how many great bosses have you had? 2, 3. I had talked to one lady, I felt so bad, she said none. So, oh my gosh. And the universal thing that everybody talks about is when a leader is in charge, or a leader is present, or a leader is in the environment, everything's better. Well, why is that? Because they've got the same tools that the manager has, or they've got the same tools that the bad leader has. All right, so these are all artistic examples. Now, what are some mechanical examples? Well, mathematicians, physicians, these are much easier to quantify, because you can take tests and you can demonstrate that. A bunch of this other stuff, there's no way to demonstrate it until it happens. Right? Mathematician, hey, yeah, I can tell you right now, here's this formula. Cool. Well, with a painter, you go and say, hey, show me how good you are. Well, they have to go do it. Same thing with all these people. Same thing with leaders. I could tell you, yeah, I'm really good at being in charge of people. All right, cocky, go over there and show me. Well, then you have to go show them. So if we have that breakdown, here's the artistic examples. Here's the scientific example. So Carl is one of the scientific people. Carl was an amazing welder. So if we looked at this Pareto distribution, he was up here. And so because we didn't want to because that company didn't want to make an exception to their pay rules, they took him and put him here. So suddenly, oh, he's a terrible manager. Well, yeah, but you put him there. Why did you do that? Why would you do that? If you've got somebody that's got a skill, keep them to where they're good at that skill and pay them for it. What the hell? Sorry, I get a little freaky about this. But it's all the same thing. So you take somebody that's your best manager, your best at systems, your best salesperson, and say, okay, we're going to make you a manager. And suddenly the person that's got this great sales talent is now here. And then we fire them, or they make everybody miserable. The people that are between here and here that we have put in charge are the ones that are making everybody's life miserable. Pretty sure they've got a talent that would make the organization better. So find out what that is and put them there and pay them so. We're going to talk about that more during the solution. So anyway, like I said, so just think about it. If these are all true, if Price's law is true and the Pareto distribution is true, then we can't just take anybody and teach them leadership. I mean, you can't. And all of you have seen these examples. Like I said, this is not my... None of this is new. All this stuff exists. I just think that we haven't put it together right. You have not seen any evidence that shows you that anybody can be a leader. You can put anybody in charge, but like I've mentioned before, we say leadership is action, not a position. Well, then find the action person and put them in charge, not somebody that you just want to put in leadership position. Hopefully this one's going to start some thinking, because I believe this is absolutely true. I talk to people that are leaders and they go, absolutely. Now you talk to other people, and I saw a great interview with Jocko Willink where somebody asked him, because Jocko's a great leader. I've read his books. They said, can you teach anybody? He goes, well, maybe not everybody, but yeah, well, he's afraid to say no, because we're always trying to say we can have anybody do anything. But even in his books, he has example of people that were in the same organization he was that were not great leaders. They didn't have the talent. They didn't have this ability. They just didn't have it. People always say, ooh, he's got it. Well, what's it? Well, it's this. It's this artistic ability. It's this creative ability. One final quote that I'll say. I saw a person that was a pretty good leader. I thought he had a little bit to lack in the humility department, but he sat there and said, well, there's nothing magical about leadership. Well, okay, there's nothing magical if you're a leader, because you're sitting there going, oh, this is easy. But these people will all say the same thing. Oh, there's nothing magic about painting. Are you kidding me? There's nothing magic about composing. Have you sat down and actually looked at the sheet music for something that Haydn did? For these people that are musicians, to me, it's wizardry. You watch somebody play a violin or a cello, can't even imagine it. I mean, especially on the cello and the violin, there's no frets, there's no marks. They're just doing all this, the eyes closed. There's nothing magic. Okay, well, you only say that because you somehow have got that talent. So congratulations, but find the talent and put those people in the talented position. All right, so as we talked about in the hierarchy, that causes that problem. Anyway, I will stop babbling. So I hope this was informative, and I hope this generates some thinking. And that's all that I have for now. So we will talk to you in the next episode.